I'm Fred Wilkinson, Chief Editor of the National Provisioner. Today I'm speaking with Sara Bratager. She is with the Institute of Food Technologists. Sara, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So there is a new, correct me if I'm wrong, new guidance under the Food Safety Modernization Act that is affecting the record keeping for traceability in seafood. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so FSMA as a whole was initiated to improve food safety throughout the US supply chain. So there have been different rules, guidance, regulations that have been coming out under FSMA. And we just recently saw FSMA Section 204 get implemented. 204 is the section that deals with traceability. So back in January, I think it was 2020, they had the draft rule out. Now, after 2 years, we've got the final rule that industry will have to implement by 2026. That is basically end-to-end traceability record keeping throughout the supply chains of the commodities that are on the food traceability list. Those commodities, seafood is one of them. There's a lot of produce on there. They're commodities that the FDA um, determined as not necessarily high risk, but a risk ranking model said, hey, these are the ones that are most likely to cause harm to consumers. They're looking at things like number of recalls, the amount of food that people consume, all the different factors that make it likely for someone to get sick. So those are the foods that we are starting to get a lot more traceability for.
Okay. And so for uh, companies that pack and process seafood, and then also handlers, product handlers, all the way to retail, what will this uh, regulatory guidance mean to them from a operational standpoint?
So from an operational standpoint, it's going to look like panic at first, probably. I think these regulations are going to bring everyone in the supply chain a lot of benefits beyond just food safety, right? Because we can use traceability for supply chain optimization, for sustainability, for all sorts of things. But to get there, we actually have to be able to collect the data, share the data, analyze that data. And I think a lot of people have heard before, supply chains were built to move product, not move data. Um, so it's going to be a big lift for all of those industry actors. A lot of them are going to have to use new technology, have new staff, implement new processes to get to the point where they can actually capture and share that data. And I think there's going to be an educational lift too. Traceability is not a brand new concept, but it's relatively new and niche, and traceability is kind of defined in different ways throughout the industry. There's different levels of education and knowledge about it, and so we're going to see a big lift. This is some of what IFT is working on, just getting out what is traceability, what is FSMA 204, because we're going to have to figure out how to get everyone on the same page before they can start implementing those changes that they need to do to become compliant.
Okay. Um, and so what as far as analyzing the data, so that will involve probably some kind of increased automation or automated processes for processors and handlers. Would that be accurate?
I would say that's accurate. I mean, it doesn't have to be the most complex process, right? Data analysis can be as simple as someone looking at supplier performance data in a spreadsheet and saying, hey, I think that one needs some work, like we should go talk to them. Or it can be as complex as, machine learning and AI. The FDA last year had this project where they used traceability import data to create this model that will predict seafood import shipments that are non-compliant using machine learning and AI. So that's like a super complex example. Basically, it can be as simple or as complex as your resources and desire will allow.
And to make sure I'm clear, and this is traceability down to like the individual package level at retail, correct?
Generally not down to the individual package level. That gets really granular. Some people do have traceability down to that level, but I think with FSMA 204, you are able to define the level of granularity. Those who are subject to the rule have to have a traceability lot code, which is just a code that identifies a grouping of product. And so if a company wanted to have it so granular that it was package by package, they could, or it could simply be like a production run's worth, right? A day's worth of production under one code. So it will depend, I think, on how much risk supply chain actors want to have, right? The more granular you are in your traceability process, the less product you'll have to take off the shelf in the event of a recall. But it's also a lot more work to have that high level of specificity. So they're going to, probably balance. Many will trace around case level or pallet level, I think is pretty common. But yeah, it's a choose your own adventure.
Okay, interesting. So what is IFT doing to kind of help its seafood industry, members or stakeholders to kind of start their journey to be in compliance with this new guidance?
So we've been working for a while on just some really high level traceability guidance. You can find on our website, we've got some really short videos that are like, what is traceability? Why do you need traceability? How do you start your implementation process? And then we've also got some more specific traceability stuff coming out with FSMA 204. We're going to release commodity specific guidance. So seafood, of course, is one of the commodities on the food traceability list. We'll have guidance tailored to the seafood industry that'll go over, what you need to have in your traceability plan, how traceability lot codes work, what data you need to collect, what data you need to share. Just kind of the basics for those industry actors. And then we also work with the Global Dialogue on Seafood Traceability. IFT was one of the co-conveners. The GDST is now an independent entity, but we remain a strategic partner, helping to build tools and update the standards that kind of guide the seafood industry in their traceability practice.
And as far as potential pathogen threats that this is aiming to prevent, is it kind of the similar things that you would find in other proteins, E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria, that kind of thing?
A lot of it is, but seafood is one of the most unique commodities on the food traceability list in that toxins are also a concern. So for just about every single food on that list, it's bacterial contamination. That's the primary concern. But seafood has some special ones, which are the histamine producing finfish and finfish potentially contaminated with ciguatoxin. So those two are also a concern and in there, but primarily it's your big bacteria, the salmonellas, the listerias, the E. coli, the ones that you hear about all the time.
And for that, is it like lab testing that would be similar to, again, like testing for E. coli, where you would take a sample from a product, send it to a lab, have it assessed for its, level of safety, that kind of thing?
I actually don't know much about toxin testing. I came from a poultry processing plant, so we were all about salmonella,
Right.
not a lot of toxins in turkeys. But pathogen testing is also a little outside of this rule, right? Like it's adjacent because that's the primary concern, but there isn't really any guidance or mandate related to this that has to do with testing. It's all about just tracking and tracing the product through the supply chain so that once someone does that test and pops a positive, they can flag it and say, hey, this one's positive for E. coli. We need to go figure out where it came from.
Okay. Are there any kind of technological, like emerging technological um, applications that are kind of powering uh, how traceability is conducted by companies?
So I wouldn't say there's any specific technology. It's really kind of the suite. We're seeing a lot of development in traceability technology. There's a lot more demand as the role of traceability really increases in the food industry. So a lot of companies are using blockchain, cloud-based computing is really popular, but what kind of traceability technology each person uses is so specific, right? Because people who are in a processing plant where it's cold, it's wet, it might be kind of dark, you may not have the greatest internet access in a cement building, is going to be really different than, the software you need to analyze traceability data at a corporate level. So you're going to have a lot of different technologies, a lot of different solutions so that you can meet the needs of everybody throughout the supply chain.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about how traceability in seafood is influencing packaging, product development, anything like that?
I can't necessarily say how it's impacting packaging, but I would say that the role of traceability as a whole is evolving, right? It's moving from voluntary more towards mandatory with the new regulations that we're seeing. It's not just, a customer demand to have a new marketing claim on the label. It's now becoming a legal requirement. Um, and we're seeing a lot of expansion around the use cases for traceability. I think for a long time, people just saw it as something for recalls or outbreak investigations, but we can use it to improve sustainability. In the seafood sector, you really can't tackle an overfishing problem if you don't actually know where the fish are coming from. And we're seeing a lot of new use in supply chain optimization too, with the last couple of years throwing into pretty harsh light the fact that a lot of our supply chains are really vulnerable to disruption. So companies are being incentivized to use that traceability data to figure out where their vulnerabilities are, so that they're not, left scrambling when a pandemic shuts down some plants or a boat gets stuck in a canal, all that kind of stuff. So overall, it's evolving. And I think as we see those use cases evolve, we'll probably see, new ways to market it. Sustainability marketing is becoming more popular, more prominent, and we'll see traceability's role in that. But it's still in that kind of early stage where everyone's figuring it out.
Okay. And what is the timetable for seafood companies to be in compliance with this new FSMA guidance?
So the official compliance date will be January, I think it's January 20th, 2026. But we would highly recommend that everyone start now. Traceability is a long process that requires a lot of collaboration between supply chain partners. So even though the compliance date is 3 years from now, we, really need everyone to start working now so that you're all set by the time 2026 rolls around.
And as far as suppliers who provide uh, applications for this traceability, is that pretty well developed? Do processors have? Are there a lot of companies that they could potentially work with to achieve this? Or?
Yeah, definitely. There are tons and tons of traceability solutions out there. And since the advent of FSMA 204, I think more traceability solutions will come alive, and those that are already existing will be thinking about how to help people in the supply chain achieve compliance, how they can design their solutions to be compatible or as compatible as possible with FSMA 204. So there's a lot out there already. I think there will probably be more coming, and that's a good thing, right? Because FSMA 204 requires anyone in the supply chain who's subject to the rule to be able to submit their data to the FDA within 24 hours, in an electronic sortable spreadsheet, which is something that will be nearly impossible to do with just a paper-based system. So yeah, the need for technology is there. The solution provider industry is going to answer that need. It's just up to everyone within the industry to decide what solution is going to be the best fit for them.
And this guidance, does it apply to companies of all sizes, whether it's a big multinational operation or if it's just kind of more like local fishing operation?
So there are some size-based exemptions. By and large, it's gonna apply to most people, but there are, small farms are exempted. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but they have a financial cap for small farms and small retailers. So there are some that won't be included in the rule, but for the most part, it's gonna hit just about everyone in the supply chain.
Oh, so kind of a farmer's market exemption type thing, it sounds like.
Yeah, like if you're just a small farmer and you are, growing tomatoes to sell to maybe a few people and yourself, like you're not going to have to worry. But if you are, a large farm that's producing for Dole, like you're not, getting out of this rule, you're going to be under the requirements. It's really a lot of it is based on risk too. Some of it's feasibility with the small farms, but it's also the fact that, if you're a small farm, you're mostly just producing locally, you're not likely to create a nationwide outbreak or be, the cause of some large scale fiasco.
And from speaking to seafood industry stakeholders, do you have a feel for any particular concerns about roadblocks to implementing this that they are expressing?
For seafood, I mean, it's always a challenge given that you can have technology on the ocean, but the ocean makes technology a lot harder, right? It's really hard to run a traceability solution out in the middle of the water. So that's always going to be a challenge for everyone. I think the globalized nature of our supply chain, too, especially in seafood, right? The US imports a lot of seafood from all over the world. And those exporter countries are going to be subject to this if they are importing to us. So that language barrier, that extended supply chain, all the hands that product goes through to get back to the US, I think is going to be really challenging for seafood in particular, but also very necessary. We have food safety issues with seafood, but we also have a lot of sustainability issues. Our oceans are in trouble. We need to be able to figure out those chains in order to start making improvement. So it'll be tough for everyone, but hopefully worth it in the end.
Well, Sarah, thank you very much for speaking with me. I appreciate it.
No problem. We're happy to talk about traceability. So appreciate you giving us this platform.